One of the chapters in A Bound Man, which I want to hold up to the camera again because it's such a splendid book, is entitled Becoming an Authentic Black. I'll quote you. The arc of Barack Obama's life is something of a zigzag between his passion to be black and the siren call of the extraordinary opportunities in the American mainstream, where the racial identity he longs for matters little. Blackness does not tempt him away from the mainstream. Rather, the mainstream tempts him away from blackness. Close quote. Now, as you will have noticed by now, you're talking to a white guy. You've got to explain to me, why does Barack Obama feel a passion to be black in the first place?
I think in his case is a little different than mine. He was abandoned by his African father at the age of 2. So in one stroke, he lost both a father and a racial identity. So here in this all-white household is this little kid who is being held accountable in the world as a black, being raised by a mother who's white, a grandmother who's white, a grandfather who is white. Almost no experience whatsoever with other blacks. And so, as I talk about in the book, as there's a longing to know the Father in Barack Obama, there's also a longing to know himself as a black, to feel that he belongs, that simple sense that other blacks take for granted, that, of course, where it's not a question at all. For him, is a lifelong angst. And so he's driven in that direction, and ends up on the south side of Chicago doing community organizing when he clearly could have gone straight ahead to law school and so forth.
I'm trying to remember the career pattern. He graduates from Harvard Law School and then goes back to the, or have I got that backwards?
Well, he graduates from Columbia, then goes 3 years in community
In any event,
organizing.
from Columbia, he could have gone to Wall Street if he'd wanted to.
He could have gone, and did for a brief moment, and quits, can't take it, wants to. This call is there, this need, and so he takes this job at below minimum wage as a community organizer and on the south side of Chicago.
Okay, now as we have this conversation, and as I read A Bound Man, I'm evaluating this man as a candidate. It's a fascinating story, merely as a matter of character study and what it says about the state of race in the United States. But he's running for president. So this notion of seeking out a black identity, the way it struck me was understandable and even commendable. Does it strike you the same way? Or is it still too much race? He's doing something because of race. How do you understand it? How do you evaluate it?
Well, I went through something of it myself. Again, from that kind of a background, I was lucky to have my father, and I grew up in segregation, and that'll give you a clear sense of.
But he was raised in a white
world. Yes.
But you were raised in a black world.
In an entirely black world,
All
right? So it was I didn't feel the pressure. I don't think in the way that he did, but it was there. I'm aware of it. There's a vulnerability that you have that people can say, as Christopher Hitchens says there. Why is he really black? So somebody who doesn't know you, who can walk up and say, well, you're not really who you seem to be. And always along with that goes this suggestion that you're a phony, that you're a bit of a fraud because of your birthright, your fate. So it's a vulnerability, and there's this desire to resolve it, and that's, I think, Obama's compulsion, really, to keep trying to establish himself as an authentic black.
Okay, now you write
failing all along.
You write. He goes to the Illinois State Legislature. He's now a member of the United States Senate for the last couple of years. He affiliates himself with a specifically black church in Chicago called Trinity United Church of Christ. You write about it at some length. So, incidentally, does Christopher Hitchens. Quote, Christopher now, run by the sort of minister that the press often guardedly describes as flamboyant. This bizarre outfit, the church, describes itself as, now he's quoting from their website, unashamedly black and unapologetically Christian, and speaks of a chosen people whose nature we are allowed to assume is Afrocentric. Operative sentence. Nobody who wants to be taken seriously can possibly be associated with such a substandard and shade-oriented place. Now, there's a point there. This is a graduate of Columbia and of Harvard Law School who's going to a place that it's reasonable to suppose is in one way or another intellectually beneath him. right?
Absolutely.
So how do we say we cut him slack because he needs this? Like, how do you understand that one?
Well, that's one of the questions I think the press, you know, he's been in this what I call white guilt bubble where they never ask him anything meaningful. How is it that you go to an Afrocentric black nationalist church where everything is black, the morality black, community black, values black, a church that your mother would not be comfortable in if she would be welcome at all? How do you reconcile something? Could you stand up in this church and say, it wasn't blackness that created Barack Obama. It was the Midwestern values of my mother. That's how it got done. So maybe the people in this church might spend a little more time talking about those values than about blackness. I don't think Obama is likely to do that. But how does he resolve it? How does he reconcile?
How do you, again, in this question of evaluating him as a candidate for the presidency, does this participation in a black church, you have nothing against religious belief. Christopher Hitchens does. Religious belief per se makes him nervous, but you don't have that. But does this make you nervous going to this church because it's black? Do you say, oh, well, that's understandable, he has to...
No, this is, and I talk about this a little bit. This is something, when you are born as he was, you endure this abandonment, and it leaves these wounds, and there is going to be, it's for anybody, an attempt to sort of fill up that void in some way or another. The only way you can do it is through 1,000 little self-betrayals, where you go to that church and you turn a blind eye to the fact that it's beneath you intellectually, that it subscribes to an ideology that would exclude the loving family and parents that you had. You betray yourself. You get used to self-betrayal as a survival mechanism, as a way of getting through the world and getting through society. And that becomes that's where you pay the price. Because when you're doing that, you're not developing a self. You're not individuating. And there clearly is some of that with Obama, this habit of self-betrayal.